Good morning from the cover crop field. In the middle of June, this is actually the beginning of June. Here we are, and this is showing our cover crop field that we planted a couple of years ago. We planted this to cereal rye and hairy vetch. And then last year we rolled that down. I actually didn't use a roller crimper because I don't have one, but what we did is when the plants were at the right size, we mowed it down, which is not recommended. I knew that at the time because it tends to want to grow back, but I wanted to experiment, and the main things were building soil and not growing a cash crop. So here you can see I've mowed this spring. We had some noxious weeds in here. I did not want them to go to seed, so I went ahead and mowed this. And so this is what the cereal rye looks like after it's been mowed. It pops back very quickly, and you can see these tall gray looking plants here with the seed heads coming out, kind of beautiful like. And all of these seed heads, let me get these where we can see them good. You can see those big beautiful grain seed heads on here. So the mower has gone over these about a week ago, and they've already shot up. No, I didn't mow it real close. This is just one mowing, so a lot of it was just knocked over. But they're standing straight up. They're trying to go to seed. They're trying to produce the next generation. And this is what happens if you use a mower in your cover crop field. So as we look down here, you can see the hairy vetch growing. So let me get a close up here. So this is hairy vetch right here in my hand. This is what it looks like. Here's a seed, here's a flower that's gonna open soon. There's probably some open flowers somewhere, but I haven't seen any yet. It's just not late enough in the year for those to have opened. But they're a big, beautiful flower. They're fantastic crops to grow. Over here we have not mown yet. And so here we have a lot of cheatgrass, and we don't want that cheatgrass seed to go to seed in here because then it'll be growing again. So that's one of the noxious weeds we were mowing. We were also, there's a bunch of thistles in here that have been being mown. So a lot of these plants are early succession. You can see the white flower in here. That's white top. The other common name would be perennial pepperweed, and it's an invasive species, and a lot of it died out last year because we inoculated this and the beneficial fungus invaded it and killed it, which is fantastic. Okay, I have found a hairy vetch flower here. I'm going to try to get a hold of it so we can see what they look like. They're very beautiful. They're purple. They're wonderful. When you see these flowering like this, that's when you want to mow it. You don't want to let these go to seed unless you want them to grow again next year. So you want to be able to mow that down and destroy that before the seeds are viable. So this is almost at the stage where we would use a roller crimper and knock it down. But this entire field got mowed once this spring. So this is the second time it has grown up. When we look this way, it has been mowed twice, about 4 weeks apart. So this just got mowed a week ago, and then 4 weeks before that it was mown. Then this was mowed, but not the second time. And so you can kind of see the difference. But the beautiful thing here is the ground is completely covered. When we look straight down on this that has only been mowed once, all we see is the tall foliage in here, which is fantastic. Even the weed seeds that are coming along is still fantastic because the plants are covering the ground. So when we get this mowed down, before the weed seeds are viable, they won't sprout. So we're breaking the cycle of the weeds, but we're getting a massive amount of the detritosphere on top of the ground. Detritosphere just means trash. Detritus means trash. The detritosphere is one of the 6 spheres of the soil. There used to be 5 spheres of the soil, but the scientist Ray Archuleta, he added in a 6th one. Him and collaboration of scientists decided that we need a phyllosphere, which I totally agree with. And phyllo means the leaf surface. So but that is not what this video is about. But as we look here, we can see that as we move back this detritosphere that's on top, we can move this back. Let's do it again, like right here, so we can just pull this back. We have a lot of detritus, and the earthworms are working, and you can see that this is being decomposed really well, and the earthworms are starting to work this down into the ground. So if we dig down a little bit, it's pretty soft here, and there's a lot of decomposed granite in here, lots of sand. It's a dark, beautiful brown color, which is what we like to see, which means there's a lot of organic matter in the soil. So that is fantastic. So this is on its way to being a functional soil. Now, what do we do with this? How do we actually plant food in this? This is the tricky part, because people think, oh man, so to get food in there, you're gonna have to till all that up. No, we don't want to till that up. We want to avoid tilling at all costs, because that's gonna collapse the 6 spheres of the soil, and we want to keep those maintained. So we have options. We could, there's too many weeds in here to use a roller crimper on this, because many of these weed species are perennials. So they will continue to grow even if we used a roller crimper. And the cereal rye is not thick enough. I didn't plant cereal rye this last year, and I did it on purpose just to see how much would come back naturally. There's places where it's pretty thick, and there's other places where it's thin. So there's nothing to really terminate and kill, because when you're using a roller crimper, you'd have to have annual species that are ready to die anyway. So that would not work in this application. But in this application, if we were going to plant right now, then we missed the boat, and we have to plan for next year. So our only option right now is to till it up to control the weeds to plant, or we would lay down cardboard and then put something on top of the cardboard, like a finished compost or potting soil to plant into. But in a big field like this, that would be impractical. So our only option, if we needed to plant this whole field right now, would be tillage. And this is where the argument for tillage comes in. And people are correct. And that's why I tilled the other field that I showed in another video. But if we were planning, then what we would do is we could cover this with a tarp. A very large silage tarp could cover large garden plots out here, but you would need to put them down in March, and they would be there through March and April and May. So about 100 days, 90 to 100 days is about right. And then you would move the tarp off of the field, and at that point you would have a bare, clean field. It would have killed all the plant life, but your 5 soil spheres would be intact. The only one that wouldn't be intact is the phyllosphere, but you are going to go ahead and plant a bunch of plants in there, and so you would get your living roots and your plants, your leaves in that soil to be thriving. So I actually did that, and I'm going to show you across the fence here, where I had a tarp for 60, I think about 68 days, 68 to 70. I'm not exactly sure when my student moved the tarp off. But here's this field here, and this is about 20 feet wide and 40 to 50 feet long. And you can see how the grass is growing all around this field. But where the tarp is, it's clean. And now you can see the plants that are growing in the center. There are some weeds coming up, but most of what we're seeing are things that have been planted. A lot of transplants in there, and corn's coming up. There's a lot of fun things that my students have planted. So there are 4 of these that I tarped to get ready for my students so that they can grow their personal garden here. So this is how you would manage a cover crop field like this if it has a bunch of perennials in it. A perennial is a plant that grows back every year. But if you have a thick stand of cereal rye and hairy vetch growing in your garden, like right here, it looks pretty good. If we rolled that down, it would help to smother a lot of bad things. But when we look straight down and we start doing a species count, we have right here, the only thing I can see is, so we've got perennial pepperweed here, we have curly dock here, so those would come back with a roller crimper. And then we have, there are some perennial grasses in here. See right here is a timothy, right here, so it would come right back. So we do have a weed problem if we were to use a roller crimper method. So in your first few years of establishing your entire, your entire soil health program, sometimes we are fighting a few weeds. Once you get 3 to 5 years in, it's gonna work fantastic. It's gonna be beautiful, and you're not gonna have problems with the plants growing and thriving, because you will have eliminated your weed problems, and now you are in a cycle of growing fantastic, awesome crops. But it all starts with growing a diverse crop. So am I saying that the weeds out here are a problem? No, they're actually not a problem. The weeds that are growing out here are actually going to be very beneficial and helpful for us, even the perennial ones. We just have to realize that it's 3 to 5 years before we get to a place where we can eradicate the perennials. And so how do you eradicate the perennial? If it's a small field, and which means really big gardens like this, then you can use the tarping. If you're on hundreds of acres, then you would just continually plant the cover crops, and you would continually roll them down until you smother out the perennial plants. And it can take time, it can take some work, and then you're growing your cash crops between the other your cover crops. Hopefully this helps you to eradicate a weed in your garden.